we are live. Hey everyone, thank you for showing up. Welcome to Stop the FOMO. My channel is all about TV reviews, and today we have the architect of the 2025 TV Shootout. You guys saw the results. You guys spent 10 hours with me, those of you who were able to bear the heat in the room with me.
Yeah.
And today we have Dwayne, otherwise known as D-Nice Davis, here to explain how he set everything up, right? And at the end, we'll answer your questions. So hold on to your questions. He wants to give you kind of like the background, the setup. And with that out of the way, I'm going to jump out. Dwayne, take it away, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing before we start, just for my mother, if she's watching this stream, my name is DE capital WAYNE.
Oh, DE. You know what? I'm going to make a correction right now. I am so bad.
Yeah, I don't
DE.
pers- yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't personally care. However, if she sees this, oh, she's a stickler
Yeah,
for
actually,
that.
I'm going to get like a knock on the door, a flight from North Carolina, like, hey, okay, all
Yeah,
right, let's do that. Dwayne Davis,
there
welcome
we
to the
go.
show. All right.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I would first like to thank yourself for having me on the stream, and also I would like to thank all of the actual manufacturers and people um, actually participated in the shootout this year. This year was very interesting, to say the least. It's actually always an interesting type of situation, but this one has had some kinks and a lot of questions. And I guess I'm here to kind of go through some of the things if you guys have questions, and more importantly, just make sure that you guys understand there was no back room, discussions, no type of underhanded things going on. Everything was legit. There was no money truck waiting or no wire transfer waiting to come in
If
from
only.
Sony. So that yeah, none of that. I wish it was. But just to give you a background on what's going on, essentially, I would love to do something where we can literally show video of how much effort is put into this actual event. I know for myself and my company, Audio Video Fidelity, I invested $35,000 total
Hmm.
into this event that I'm
Wait.
not getting.
So you mean you didn't get paid, but you were paying others to be in this
I didn't get
event?
paid. All of the flights to fly up to do calibrations for the shootout, that was on my company's dime. All of the testing and evaluation I did prior to the actual shootout, that was on my company dime. I didn't get reimbursed from the Zone family. So no, everyone who's involved, they invest they actually donate their time. They put a
Hmm.
lot of effort in, and it's nothing that's basically, as I should say, nothing was half-assed. Yes, things can go wrong. Things can, we can hit road bumps, obstacles, et cetera, et cetera. That happens every single year, but we work through those things. So, and that's exactly what we did this year. So, I guess for me, I was looking at some of the comments online, starting off with, I want to say the judging, I should say the judges themselves. So, in the pre planning meetings that we had before the shootout, one of the things that I wanted to do this year compared to prior years were to have three sets of judges. I wanted three calibrators. I wanted three influencers slash people from the review industry, and I wanted three, I guess you can call them advanced slash enthusiasts from the forums. So we reached out to, well, the calibrators we already had. So that's where you have your Jason, your John, your Cecil, and also David in a sense. But we had those guys fill up that bucket of the ask. The second ask were the reviewers. So we actually reached out to a couple of reviewers, and we finally got some that actually responded. So we did have three reviewers. one from AV Nirvana, one from The Verge, and the other from E Acoustics. I know all of these guys. Um, so there was nothing underhanded with what they did or what they were trying to do, or their basically their level of knowledge. The third set is where we kind of failed at. So we reached out to some individuals on specifically AVS Forum, and they declined or referred us to someone else as an alternate. And those actual individuals, for some reason or another, did not basically confirm with Robert or any of the zones to actually be a part of the event. So that left us with essentially a total, I think it was six judges when we were supposed to have nine. And then also we were going to have an additional three as alternates just in case someone couldn't make it. And that was a great idea because guess what? Three people didn't make it this year. So out of the six known that I knew of, the others were chosen by Robert and his family, which is that's their choice. That's their actual. They have the capability to vet people. They know more people than I do in some cases. So they reached out to people that would be available to come to that shootout and participate in it, and that's what happened. So as far as I've seen comments, and I've spoken to one guy that I know who was vocal on the forum about I guess two of the judges not really understanding what the criteria was for certain actual metrics of the actual shootout. I didn't personally witness it. He came to me after the shootout and explained that to me. And for me, when it came to the judges, I don't know why. I guess it was a pride thing or whatever. But if you did not understand the actual ask, come reach out to me. I'm right there. Just say, hey, well, what did you want me to look at again? Can you help? Can you help me out with that? I wouldn't have a problem with it. So I guess for me, that was an opportunity that will be corrected for next year's shootout. So not a big deal. Other things that I saw that were kind of how should I say it? Kind of shocking, I guess, from the community was how in the world did the LG come in fourth place with all of the capabilities that it has as far as as the calibration controls are concerned, also as far as um, this new panel that they had. Well, as I said to a couple of people at the event, and I stand by this, LG has tremendous opportunity. But for some reason, every single year, they find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. So this year, they introduced um, this undefeatable contrast slash sharpener that is on the entire image. It's on every single input, excuse me, every single video mode. So the judges did see that. The problem with that actual feature is it exaggerates and it enhances negative items in the actual image. So it's going to enhance macro blocking. It's going to enhance any posterization from factory calibration. It's going to enhance some of the anomalies with the using the white subpixel. It's gonna enhance a host of other items. That was one of the things that where it was shown with test patterns and also followed up with content where that actual feature drug them down into basically the score that they received. Another thing in regards to color. So I always like to use the shootout as an opportunity to educate everyone in this because for me, this is an edutainment or edu-experience event. So it's an educational, and I want you to experience how it is to see a truly calibrated image up against a reference display. So, with that being said, most reviewers, most calibrators are using Calman. So when it comes to Calman, Calman does some things that kind of sweep things under the rug. And I'm not trying to throw shade on Calman or portrait display. I'm not trying to do any of that. I'm just telling it how it is. There are certain items in Calman that don't allow you to do real diagnostic on TVs or any display that you're trying to measure. That for me, I have to use other calibration software suites to correctly pull out and understand what's going on. However, in Calman, I do have a customized workflow that I can basically scratch the surface. Where if I see certain things per the measurements within Calman, I can then know exactly what to look at in my other calibration software to really show, okay, this is the reason why this is going on. So, with that being said, um, yes, per the standardized reports that Calman has for measuring display, the LG looks great. However, if someone were to measure 1% through 10% in 1% increments all the way up, you will start to see anomalies. If you pay attention to the actual numbers, not the graphs, because the graphs themselves have an issue where they have this what they call a perceptual feature that as the luminance level of your measurements go down, it doesn't show it in the graphs as high of an error compared to if it's like at the full brightness. I can demonstrate. Anyone wants to see this, I can demonstrate it via the grayscale tracking from one program to another, clearly showing the distinct differences in why this actual feature causes what I see as I guess blinders for anyone else trying to do proper diagnostic of these TVs. So getting back to the LG, the processing with the contrast sharpener stuff, they failed to put a toggle that the end user can turn it on, turn it off, or set it in different intensities. All the other manufacturers have something similar to what they've done this year. However, outside of Sony, which uh, intelligently put it for professional mode this year, turned off the majority, actually all of the reality creation enhancement that they were on the prior years. But Panasonic, you can turn off the same feature that the LG has and give that opportunity to the end user to choose. Do I want a sharper, enhanced image, or do I want something that is more reference grade? That's where LG shot themselves in the foot. What people are missing as far as enthusiasts, other calibrators, other reviewers, etc., is inside of Calman. If you're only looking at Calman, you need to manually go in there and look at the lower end steps, and you need to modify their actual reports, their workflow, so that you can see the detail that you need to see. Again, it's right there in the data that on the lower end of the grayscale, the LG doesn't track very well. And when you start actually measuring the colors in the same area of the same luminance range, you will see that they are all skewed, that they go left, right, upside down, inside out. That's what they do. Unfortunately, a 3D LUT software suite is only going to fix so many things. I know for myself, I used a 10,263 point characterization profile to calibrate that actual LG at the shootout. So this is the same standard profile that I use for when I go to post-production houses and do their actual client LGs, or if they have like a QD-OLED for the same thing, an external 3D LUT, I do the same thing for them. So this is the largest 3D LUT that I use. Best of the best. Um, so I can't do anything about that. So per the measurements that I see from Calman, it should have performed the best in SDR color. It failed because we showed the dynamic glow test patterns on Spears and Munsil. Now, for me, I know everyone who's a reviewer does have access to this actual disc. I don't know why they don't actually use this for their actual reviews, because if you look at the dynamic low for red, green, and blue, you would see the exact same things that we saw at the shootout. The exact same things. I know this because I've already calibrated no less than 50 LGs, and guess what? They're on every single one of them, especially the green one. So that was the LG. That's where the LG failed and was scored very low on the color side of the house. Um, when it came to the processing, again, processing, and that was with their sharpener and stuff. It was also because the process, some other stuff in the LG with processing that will never show up in an actual in measurements themselves. You have to take yourself out of the instrument and put and use your own eyeballs with content and test patterns. It just didn't perform very well. I can't change their processing. I don't have that level of access to go in and turn off certain features. I wish I did, but I did not. If I did, I would. So Panasonic, that for me, there were two products in that shoe that were a wow factor for me: the Samsung and the Panasonic. Panasonic, wonderful actual display, love it, and they were. I'm going to be very transparent with this. They were, and you know this, Quinn, and I have to thank you for this. But so when it came to the Panasonic, we knew what its release date was, which was originally supposed to be released June 17th, correct? If I'm not mistaken, right? Yep. So I did that pre-order with Amazon where I got it when it was that ridiculously cheap amount. So I
Oh, you got
pre-ordered.
that.
Yep, I got that. So I pre-ordered it. I was expecting it to be in June 17th. However, it got delayed. Panasonic was generous enough to send me an actual sample so that I can actually learn the actual TV, and so that their actual representation in the shootout could have been as best as possible. So thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it, and it absolutely helped in me getting your actual display the way it was. So when it came to the Panasonic, it just does certain things right. Once you calibrate it properly, and it is what it is. Like, it has better color than the LG does in HDR mode. That's objective measurements. I can show that, not a problem. Now, also, it does some processing that is different than the LG, but at the same time, it does have a sharpener, but it's not as intensive or as in your face as the LG is. If you do pixel peeping, you will see stuff with that actual panel. It does exist, but from the viewing distances that the judges were standing so that they can see the reference monitor, and then the TV to compare to the reference monitor right there in their face, they had to be at a certain distance. You would not be able to see this enhancer at that distance on the 65-inch sample that we had. So other than that, the Sony itself, for me, I was very disappointed in. And I had a conversation with their engineer who came there. I've known him, and he's been coming to the shootout pretty much since I started doing the shootout with Value Electronics. So for me, the Bravia 8 Mark II is not up to the historical standards of Sony. It does not, in my opinion, deserve the Sony badge. It doesn't. I showed him the measurements as to why. And from our conversations, the Bravia 8 Mark II is essentially
Now,
an
Dwayne, just
A95L.
to
Yes.
just to clarify, this is
Yep.
HDR and SDR, or only HDR?
Both.
Okay.
The entire package. So it is basically a A95L, the guts of an A95L with the new panel from Samsung inserted on top of it, with the prior or the legacy 8 series factory calibration. That factory calibration is what causes me to be disappointed in, because it is not, again, at the level of Sony that I expect from them for that actual product. So for me, I don't like that product. I personally don't really recommend that product to any of my clients. It's just not there. I would say you just get an A95L. But that's my opinion, just like everyone else has one. So I'm disappointed that the true, in my opinion, the true two displays that were strong contenders this year, the Panasonic and the Samsung, did not come in first place. Samsung, they've made significant strides in trying to improve their color. Unfortunately, you have to go into the service menu to fix it. Yes, that Samsung, we did go into the service menu and we corrected some stuff to get the colors where they were. So it did win, if I'm not mistaken. Did it not win the color category for, I think, for which one was it? Or it was something in HDR that they won. Let me
The
pull up.
Panasonic?
No, the Samsung. It won a
Oh
couple of
yeah,
things. Yeah. So
I think it won the
when
Bright
it
Room
came,
maybe.
yeah, I won the Bright Room. So when it came to that, I'm trying to pull up what I saw earlier. Just give
Yeah,
me a moment
let me
here.
see. I mean, I have the master score. Let me look at it real quick.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. The master score.
Yeah,
See,
here we
for
go.
me, yeah,
So
I don't. Yeah,
Samsung won the color and bright living room.
yep. So in the color and bright in that in actual environment, the the saturation and the brightness of the display, that's appealing. However, for reference quality comparison to that BVM monitor, it's just a little too hot. Unfortunately, they didn't have anything as far as a firmware available for consumer world to update their colors. So that's what happened with that. But I look at, after the shootout was over, and I'm pretty sure if you go back and look at the video, you can kind of see it in my face that I was really disappointed in what was going that the Sony, because like I said, the Sony was not the Sony quality that I expect from them. So I was very disappointed. I think it showed in my face as that was kind of reading off, the winners and stuff like that. I was very disappointed but the judges spoke. I cannot, be upset about that. I was not a judge. I don't want to be a judge. So I respect every single judge that participated in this, and I expect their actual their scores and what they rated these TVs on. Again, were there opportunities and can there be opportunities to improve the judging? Absolutely. It will always be like that. There is nothing out there that's perfect, and I don't expect it to. The only thing I can do is learn from the the stuff that's happened yesterday, basically, to make tomorrow better. That's all I care about at this point. But so this is the funny thing about this. So after I left the shoot, I went back to the hotel. First call I got was from my very good friend, very good friend in Atlanta, who said, he said, "Hey man, I just saw the stream. I was looking at the winner, and I gotta say, man, it was rigged. It was rigged. It was rigged. It was rigged." I'm like, "No, it wasn't." He was like, "How in the world? How in the world did the Sony win?" And you and I had this conversation. We discussed this, and I understood everything that you said. That was everything wrong with that actual TV. How in the world did it win? I told him I couldn't understand. I did not know. So went to bed, woke up the next morning, and it dawned on me. This whole event and this whole drama and stuff when it comes to the Sony kind of reminds me of the 2024 NFL football season. I myself am a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Been a Kansas City Chiefs fan for years. So if anyone who's an NFL fan understood all of the drama and the flack that went on last season when it came to the Chiefs and everyone thinking that, oh, the refs are, you know, working for them, they're cheating, they're allowing them to do this, they're allowing them to do that, etc., etc. For me, they were a sloppy team overall last year. They did not deserve, in my opinion, to go to the Super Bowl. It showed in their season. I'm just being honest. I feel that the Sony was the same thing. Here's the kicker, though. So they went to the Super Bowl, and guess what happened? They got their ass whooped by Philly. And I am not mad at Philly for doing that. They exposed them for everything that the laziness, the disorganization that the entire team was all a part of because it was a team effort. They exposed them and they got cooked badly at the Super Bowl. For me, I wanted the same thing to happen at the shootout. But you know what? It didn't. But it dawned on me. The Sony for me is like the Kansas City Chiefs and also if you go back, the New England Patriots when Tom Brady was there. Okay? Always winning. People for some reason do not like someone or an organization to consistently win. I don't know why that is. That's for society to figure out. I'm not one of those people, okay? I just know it's kind of that similarity is there. But for me, it came when I looked at all of the scores and I saw what pulled the Sony to win by that .03 number. It came down to one thing. Just like with those two top teams in a clutch, it comes down to one person on that team, the quarterback. Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. Doesn't matter. In the clutch, they're going to come through and get the win. On the Sony, the XR processor. Hands down, that was the reason why it won. Outside of the calibration issues that it had, it is excellent in cleaning up low bit rate, low quality content. That showed in the judging. And specifically, it showed when we were presenting from an Apple TV HD so that we can get the true raw 1080p source over Wi-Fi, which is what most consumers are using. They're not using hardwire. We could have used hardwire, but we try to replicate, consumer world and what they're trying to use at home. So over streaming, it cleaned up that image better than the competition. That's just the bottom line. Every single judge there agreed on that. And that was with the Game of Thrones season 1, episode 3, from basically, I think, after the credits, the first 2 minutes, I think, was what we evaluated for content wise. Cleaning up, it was basically the best. The other one that we did was Walking Dead. I think it was like season 13, episode 1, or season 16, episode 1. I can't remember. But those are the two pieces of content that caused the Sony to pull ahead of everyone else that the other ones just could not keep up with. So when I thought of that analogy, I was at peace. I understood how something that I personally don't think is up to Sony quality, and I personally don't think should have won the shootout, actually did. I hope everyone in internet land can come to the same conclusion if you really look at things unbiased and objectively and look at the numbers themselves. So that's just my spiel on this. Again, my role was to basically lead the event. I was not the head cheese. I was not, the boss of the boss. That was the Zone family. They always have the final decision. I just have their ear and they trust me to actually give them sound advice so that we can have the best of the best, TV competition that's out there. I know we have copycats now, and that's fine. Love it. Thank you for replicating what we Robert and I, excuse me, not Robert and I, Robert and who brought me on created many years ago, and so that others in the world have the opportunity to see something similar. But we are the original, and we're going to try, as always, to always be the best.
And we're definitely going to, near, I guess, the end of this live stream, we're going to talk about what your plans to make it better. Obviously, Robert will review these improvements, but based on what you're saying, you're seeing improvements already. So I have a list of questions that people have been throwing out there that we're definitely going to
Yeah.
hit. And before we jump into that, let me thank today's sponsor, RUIPRO. I use RUIPRO optical cables. Some of you guys
So
run
do I.
long lengths of copper. You don't know which optical cable to use. RUIPRO, Amazon, quick, and they have a lifetime warranty. So great cables for those who are looking for optical. Now, so here are some questions I kind of put together. And now
Yep.
I know we did this, but what are your thoughts on TVs tested out of the box? How many people actually calibrate their TVs? So for those who don't know, it's not clear on the results, but there is a section called Bright Living Room. And I believe
Hmm.
that was kind of out of the box, right, Dwayne? Did we do that out of the box
Yeah.
without any calibration?
Yeah. So there is that actual that item there. I'm trying to pull up the actual ballot here so I can follow along here. All right. So when it comes to the out of the box stuff, I personally am not a fan of it simply because I know how these TVs are, how they run through the factory. It is, guys, it is not possible to get the level or even close to the level of calibration that someone can do in house for you at the factory. It's just not possible. If you go to a factory and you witness what's going on, you will fully understand. And this is from someone who deals with TVs that cost a couple of $100 all the way up to systems that literally cost a million and $1.2 million. I do them all. Not the $1.2 million ones still need a calibration, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people are going to balk about that, but hey, you don't understand manufacturing these actual these things. This is not military grade stuff in any shape, form, or fashion at any of those price ranges. It's never going to happen. They require a calibration to get it right for many, many factors. So,
Yeah.
personal preference, room conditions, um, and even basically the target for, I guess you can say, the white point target, because this just like any other year, D65, the coordinates for D65 should not be used for everything. It is not, unfortunately, in today's world, it is not a one size fits all. No, it is not. If we did the out of the box um, in the most accurate mode, which we did, by the way, we did do the most accurate mode. However, if we were to level set everything to 100 nits for SDR, and then for HDR, not turn on the dynamic tone mapping on 3 of the 4 displays, you would have seen and understood. Well, if you were there, you would have seen and understood why what comes out of the factory is not even close. The only thing he had to
And
start with, the only thing he had to start with was the color of white. Just put up white, boom, that's your first one. Put up 50%, stimulus white, boom, there's your second thing. Then you can throw in some additional colors and you'll start to see what I'm explaining.
and I'm going to jump in there.
Yep.
If it's not calibrated so you have a reference, as we always talk about when I speak to calibrators, the brightest, most colorful TV always wins. You have no idea, is it supposed to be that bright? It's supposed to be that colorful. And so if you have that kind of a shootout, everyone's going to push above reference, right? You have the EOTF curve. Ah, screw
Mm-hmm.
the EOTF curve. I'm going to lose. So they're going to make it super bright, super saturated. And then next thing you know, it'll be vivid mode versus vivid mode because judges have no idea. Oh, should it be that bright? Well, if I don't know, then I guess the brightest TV wins. So that's why what Dwayne said is so important. You have to at least put on some reference. Otherwise, by the end, oh, 8,000 nit TV, it won by default because it's so bright and so
Yep.
saturated, right?
Because yeah, people are attracted. The average person, the average consumer, is attracted to a bright, shiny object. That's just
That's
facts.
it. Yeah, and
Um,
judges or
the
not, they don't know. Maybe it is supposed to be that
correct.
bright. They have no
Yep.
reference. And so this kind of is related in terms of brightness, right? HDR.
Hmm.
And we saw how SDR and HDR are weighted similarly, identically. And people are saying this HDR is where these premium displays shine. Uh, I don't like, he doesn't like to see the wins on SDR. Can we prioritize HDR content? Why didn't we do that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, number one, I think you need to look at the numbers because, believe it or not, the majority of the content out there that people watch is SDR today. The unfortunate thing, though, is, for instance, Apple TV, Fire TV, probably even Roku, if I'm not mistaken, the out of the box setup for those actual devices, guess what they're doing? They're converting every single thing to HDR, everything, or Dolby Vision. So you have to know, you have to be savvy enough to go in there and properly set up those settings. So by the actual numbers, sure, the majority of stuff out there is being watched as in an HDR format. However, is the actual content itself truly HDR content? The answer is no. 100%
Really?
no.
Hmm.
Yes, 100% no. So, um, again, I try to be as, um, I want to call it global as possible, and I wanted to touch on every single aspect of what I have seen in the field as far as what people actually use to make sure that we cover it in the shootout. So we did SDR, we did HDR, we did SDR and HDR via streaming, we did it via disc, we did it via Kaleidoscape. When it came to the actual stuff that we actually compared and judged on, it was actually more loaded on the HDR side than the SDR side. That's
Oh,
just how it came out to be.
okay,
Although
fair enough.
although the weighting was equal across the board, we actually showed more HDR test patterns, more HDR content to go with said test patterns. That's what happened at the shootout.
Okay.
Now,
And
yep, I'm going to say
no, that's
this.
okay. That was very enlightening, but go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say what one thing people don't realize when it comes to this event. Can you imagine sitting at an event, sitting in basically a patio chair, or a picnic chair,
Yeah, if
literally,
that.
or a card table chair, however you want to call these things, sitting in that chair for how long were we there? 9 hours?
Hmm.
Can you imagine doing that? Sooner or later you're going to tune out. So it's very difficult to cater to all of this stuff and to do it properly and make sure said judges are not burned out, are not sleepy, are not hungry, are not anything else but focused on doing this actual job correctly.
Hmm.
That's an extremely hard challenge, and I did my best, to host this and kind of make jokes and do this and that to keep everyone involved and engaged in it. So I think I did a pretty good job on that part. I know I got a lot of compliments for how I attempted to keep everyone engaged in it. So, but I mean, it's very difficult to do something like that. Very difficult.
And speaking of difficulty, so this is
Hmm.
a common theme. So I'm going to address Tim Silver's question as well. Would Robert and Val Electronics consider another judging criteria, not comparing to the reference monitor, but more of a people's choice, like what Vincent, HDTV Test, or Philips do in the UK? And so this goes back to what we were talking earlier. If you don't have a reference monitor, the brightest TV always wins. So even though it appears that maybe Vincent or Philips has a people's choice, trust me when I say they choose a certain brightness and then at least match all the TVs to that same brightness, and then you compare how it looks on that brightness. Otherwise, the brightest TV will affect your eyes. You're going to look at the bright TV, and then all the other TVs will look dim. And automatically, the other TVs look sucky, and the bright TV is like, wow, that thing pops. And so I understand everyone's desire for people's choice, but it's really hard to create a level playing field where the brightest TV doesn't always win. What are your thoughts on like a People's Choice Award that Tim Silvers is saying?
We did that before.
Oh,
Again, the Value Electronics Shootout is the original shootout. We did that in the beginning. I know
mhm,
this because I was a part of it. Those were the original shootout criteria back in the day when myself, Kevin Miller, and David McKenzie were doing the shootout. We didn't
mhm,
have a BVM reference monitor at that time. The only thing we did was calibrate those TVs to the best of our abilities to D65, and we put up test patterns and we watched content, and literally the end result was said judges there, which at that point in time they were mostly enthusiasts. They picked the actual best TV per their subjective opinion. Keyword subjective. So over time, we got a lot of flack and complaints that it was not objective. It was too much bias going on. There were plants from different manufacturers, this and that, fanboy this, fanboy that. So guess what
right.
they did? They changed the criteria and required that the judges have some type of credential to that made them qualify to judge these actual TVs. And then on top of that, brought in the BVMs. Bringing in the BVMs was my idea. Now, I know if I look back in history, at that point in time, I know at the same time the UK one did something similar. But I know for a fact I actually created that idea. I pitched that idea to Robert, and he agreed to it, and that's when he reached out to Sony to get the BVMs. Now, why do we not use a different reference monitor? Simply because the Sony BVM HX310, HX3110, and the X300s are the most popular reference monitors used in Hollywood for content creation. We want to use, and we're always going to use, the most popular one so that we are in line with what the stuff is actually being created on. Yes, we could use something else, but as soon as that something else becomes the most popular one being used, then it's welcome to be our reference monitor. Until that happens, the Sony HX3110 and the Sony HX310 are our de facto reference monitors for this event. Period.
And I agree with that because people don't realize if you want creator's intent, which is a lot of people say, I just want to see what creator's intent is. And if the creator spends all their time on a Sony reference monitor, they want you to see what they saw on a Sony reference monitor. So the least we can do is at least show you what creator's intent was that was on a Sony reference monitor. So if there
Correct.
is some bias to that, that's a different discussion. But at the end, how else do you show creator's intent unless you use the same grading monitor that Hollywood uses, which is what you said, the reference,
Yeah.
the BVM, Sony BVM. Now, we haven't talked about your personal ranking because you weren't a judge, but you saw the content and you actually probably know these
Hmm.
TVs in and out. So Jason wants to
I
know,
do.
okay, Dwayne, why don't you rank the sets? And this could be not just about the shootout, but the literally hundreds of TVs you calibrate for Robert of Electronics and
Hmm.
on your own at your own company. What are your thoughts as far as ranking these TVs for SDR and HDR from top to bottom?
Top to bottom. If I the whole picture, yes, every single TV in the shootout has its own warts. It has every single TV in the shootout outside of the BVM monitors, and even the BVM monitor to a certain extent has its own warts. So taking that into consideration for SDR, my favorite is going to be the LG. And I say this even with all of the warts that it has on the lower end, which they do need to fix, LG. I don't know why you have not fixed this, because guess what, guys? This stuff has existed in prior years' models. You know what? Go back with the Spears and Munsil disc, the dynamic low red, green, and blue, and take a look from a calibrated image. You will see the same anomalies. So for me, because of the level of control set that I have to really get in and tweak that actual image, the LG, as of right now, is my favorite for SDR. Okay. Second is going to be Panasonic. Again, because of the 3D LUT capability, same as the LG. After that, it's a it's a two-way tie between Samsung and Sony. And I say this because Sony historically, just out of the box, the colors don't really need to be touched. They do such a fantastic job with their factory LUT. Historically, not with the Bravia 8 Mark II. Historically, they do such a fantastic job with that factory LUT that a click here and there is all you need to make the colors just as good as what you would see on a full-blown 10,000 point 3D LUT calibrated LG. That's phenomenal. That's excellent engineership right there. And I call it engineership. Okay. Samsung, I can get something similar if either A, I go into the service menu and make some modifications, or more importantly, B, just attach an external 3D LUT to it. I could get the same image, you know? So it's LG, followed closely by Panasonic, and then equally Sony and Samsung.
And I think you literally just answered Buddy's super chat. Thanks, Buddy, for your generosity. D-Nice, thanks for your time out of your schedule for this Q&A. Your thoughts on people saying WOLED is dead? Well, clearly not. You chose a WOLED LG during the 2024 shootout. Comments on why gaming is not part of the shootout. So before we get to the gaming part, I'm sure you have comments on that. I wanted to follow up because you chose the G5, but you said SDR specifically. The
Specifically SDR.
Right. Now, what about HDR for those who watch a lot of Netflix? They're seeing the HDR flags. Like, well, I watch a lot of HDR. What would you choose for HDR if that was a priority?
Samsung and Sony, historical Sony, not Bravia 8 Mark II. Historical Sony and Samsung, number one, because it's QD-OLED. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, when you're looking at stuff that's not clamped down to P3 color, it is still better than the WRGB OLED. Although the current WRGB OLED module that's out there right now in both the Panasonic and LG G5, that's a phenomenal panel. But number one is going to be them. Number two is probably going to be for me, actually not probably, definitely going to be for me, the Panasonic. The Panasonic in the HDR presentation, the skin tones are very, very accurate with no touching of the CMS. Even though I can use the CMS controls to tweak here and there, I don't even need to use it. I just use the factory 3D LUT for the HDR section. Phenomenal. So that's going to be my number two. Followed by, of course, coming in last, the LG. For me, the LG in HDR, when compared to the Panasonic, the skin tones are a little too red, meaning that they're too hot. If you use the color control to take it from 50 to 49, it's too much desaturation across the entire color spectrum. You can level set the skin tones, but everything else becomes desaturated. Not a good look. Not a good look in my book. So Samsung, Sony, number one, equal.
For HDR.
For HDR, equal. Number two, Panasonic, followed by LG. Now, for me, I would love to see what Panasonic could do with a QD-OLED module. I would love to see that.
I agree.
Because just because of the quality of what they pay attention to for reference. They actually understand reference and they always strive for it. That much I can say by working with their actual product this year.
And now this is kind of a common question I'm seeing in the past and as right now is gaming. So let me pull up that question real quick.
Yep, hold on. This is still Buddy. Hold on, we haven't finished answering Buddy here. Let me.
Actually, so let me. Actually, ask that. Yeah.
So let me address this. So is WOLED dead? No, and I say this because, unfortunately, current content creation, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood, but it's almost like this is Star Wars, and we have rebels against the Empire here, because they are not they are not 100% doing the maximum of HDR as far as brightness is concerned. If you look at all of the latest stuff that's rolling out right now, the max on the light output is literally 600 nits or less, literally 600 nits, and it's all pretty much locked into P3 color. I don't personally like that. I would love for content creators to be more creative and create something that, okay, if you want to not, go, willy nilly with the brightness, be creative with the colors and don't restrict it to P3 color. Show me how creative you are by creating something that is that can be level set with SDR, but at the same time show the strengths of Rec 2020 color. I would love to see that from the content creators at the studios right now with the current stuff. And
Yeah.
one of my favorite movies that I'm excited to see this year is Tron Ares. I'm going to
Ah.
be disappointed. Yeah, I'm going to be disappointed because I know that HDR Master's probably going to be limited to about 400 nits.
Oh
I'm,
no! Don't say it.
I promise you, I just have this feeling that's what's going to happen. I would love to see Tron Legacy and Tron Ares, because both of them are coming out on 4K UHD Blu-ray and on Kscape, and of course, the streaming
Yeah.
platforms. But I
Yeah.
would love to see that unclamped Rec 2020.
Yeah.
That actual content, it deserves it.
It
So
deserves it.
those working on it, well, have probably already finished working on it right now. Can you go back and do another pass at it at full blown 2024? Please, please,
Yeah.
just send me the bill and I'll pay it. But I want to see it at that full blown 2020.
And uh, before we go, because I really love what you said about the full blown 2020. So we'll get to the why is gaming not part of the shootout, but that takes me to this kind of related comment.
Yeah.
So speaking of 2020 coverage, if they're using the 3110, which is currently kind of like the HDR monitor,
Hmm.
are they getting enough coverage on the 3110 to get the 2020? Because I know you commented earlier that QD-OLED may even exceed, or actually it does exceed the
It
3110
does.
when it comes to coverage. So what are your thoughts? Or what is the limit
Well,
of the 3110?
the 3110 is right around 82, 83% BT 2020 gamut
Okay.
coverage.
Okay.
So in those scenarios, just depends on who's doing what studio we're talking about. They would probably refer to a secondary monitor, which is going to be a QD OLED, more than likely. That does go up to 92, 93% coverage,
Hmm.
so that they can see more of that color that's missing from the BVM. I mean, the
Hmm.
BVM reference monitor. So they have tool sets to do that. Otherwise, they just use. I guess they can just look at the scopes and stuff and resolve to see what's going on. But if they want to actually physically see with their eyes, they're going to use QD OLEDs.
Yeah. Awesome. And so now, lastly, why isn't gaming a part of the shootout? Like, have we made attempts at this, or what are the obstacles of making gaming part of the shootout?
Yeah, so we've discussed this to nauseum, behind the
I know
scenes.
you
It's,
did.
it's yeah, you've been a part of some of these actual conversations. It's just not possible. Now think about it. We're using a switch, right? So we're gonna have to plug a game system into a switch that's gonna introduce lag, input lag, port that to multiple displays that each one of them have their own input lag characteristics. So from a gaming experience, it's just not possible. Can we just look at games and see and look at colors? Sure, we could do that, but what benefit is that just to look at a color of a game and say, oh, this one looks more accurate? On top of that, as far as I know, the gaming industry still is not at the same level of color quality and color standards as it is on the video content side of the house. So I don't know what they're using to quantify their games as far as color is concerned. So looking at it on a BVM reference monitor, what's the point? How is that rep monitor any different than the desktop monitor I have on my actual desk. I don't know because
Hmm.
I don't know what said. I know in the gaming industry that they're still not at that level of standards. As far as I know, there may be only a couple of gaming companies that actually use BVMs for anything. Other than that, they're
Okay.
probably yeah. As far as I know, they're just using LCD monitors. Again, it's just not. It's not. It still needs. It needs to be in the oven a couple more years before we touch it. Basically,
Agreed.
so yeah. But again, the main thing is trying to put an Xbox or a PlayStation through a switch through multiple things. And if we don't do that, let's just say we say, oh, forget it. You know, there's four TVs that's bringing four PlayStation 5s, four Xboxes, four PCs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, how are you going to really judge that when I guess you can have your gaming judges who can plot between one game and another, but how much time is that going to take?
Yeah.
You know, right now the shootout is literally 8 hours, and I tried my best, you know, to reduce that this year. It still ended up being 8 hours, although the you know, and 2 hours of that was lunch. So I did. If I take out if I right if I subtract out the lunch part, I actually
Yeah.
did
If you
reduce the
starve the
time frame.
judges, if you
Right?
starve
Yeah.
the judges, don't give
So
them
yeah. So
lunch.
right. So you know, again, there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to the shootout that you know people just don't understand. And yes, gaming. I know the gaming, you know, um, group fan base out there is very very large at this point. Unfortunately, it's just not ideal right now to do it right. If I can't do it right, I'm not going to touch it. I don't want to do anything half-assed. So if anyone has any ideas to create a gaming criteria to have that experience where we don't these obstacles that I pointed out can be done, please send them to me. If they work, I will more than happily, you know, recommend that we do gaming next year. But as
You
of
know,
right
and then
now and everything we research, it's not possible. It's just not. It's not ideal to do it because it's not objective.
and that goes to the word objective judging. These judges are not gaming judges. Do we bring another crew? All right, day two, new set of
Right.
judges. These are gaming judges who have the eyes for motion resolution, whatever. So yeah, no, you got it.
Right.
And speaking of gaming, Samsung, gaming brand, right? Segue to Night
Mm-hmm.
Cypher's super chat. Thank you so much, Night. Would you say that Samsung's processing this year is among the elite compared to the last few years?
Uh, elite as far as whom because
How about the
there's only
four that
one
we
elite.
reviewed, right? The flagship that we
I mean,
saw at the shootout.
yeah. I mean, for me, it's literally the XR processor, and then everything else is all equal at level set at second place.
Hmm.
So, is the Samsung processing equal to the Sony? It depends on what you're speaking of. If we're speaking of cleaning up low bit rate stuff, no.
Mm.
That goes for the LG, that goes for the Panasonic. That's not their strengths. If we're looking at other metrics, sure, it can equal it. Yes, absolutely.
And this, speaking of Sony's issues, we know the strength of
Mm-hmm.
XR processor, but clearly posterization is not strength in HDR, or even some things that you mentioned, SDR. Is the Bravia 8 Mark II's posterization issue and overall poor performance, those metrics you discussed, HDR dark scenes? Can an update fix that? Mine was bought calibrated from electronics, and I love it outside of those most challenging scenes. And I think let's throw in LG as well, because someone asked, well, I have an
Mm-hmm.
LG G5 with similar issues. Are any of this stuff fixable in firmware? What are your thoughts of the history of these TVs when they have these issues?
Well, I had a deep conversation with the engineer from Sony there when he stopped by earlier before the shootout just to check
Hmm.
on, you know, the Bravia 8 and get my opinion on it. So, I mean, we had a very candid, like I said, we had a candid conversation about the Bravia 8 Mark II. Um, as far as can it be corrected via a firmware update, I'm not sure. I know he said that he spoke with Tokyo in regards to the posterization, but I'm not sure if it's 100% fixable via firmware. As far as I could probably say probably because they fixed, the stuff with the Dolby stuff last year on the A95L via firmware. But I can't say 100% sure. I wish they would, as far as the posterization is concerned. But overall performance in the dark HDR areas, that's going to go back to that factory calibration. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure they can do a firmware update that would update the baseline LUTs. Um, However, would they do it from my track? Well, if I look at the track record of Sony, probably not. Um, that's I'm just being honest here. I don't think they're going to do it. When it comes to LG, LG can do the same thing. I know that they have made improvements. Same case point with HDR and Dolby Vision this year on the G5s and the C5s for that matter. Um, However, for me, when it comes to this, I am a consumer first. And for all manufacturers, personally, I am tired of you throwing these products out here and having us be beta testers for your stuff. I really need you guys to listen and scold your actual your video development team. No, no, no. Scold them to be better at their actual
Mm-hmm.
job because quite frankly, I know I'm tired of seeing this stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
know other consumers are tired of seeing this stuff. If you cannot do this year over year, and I know how challenging it is with all the features that you're trying to add and improve year over year with your new product lineup, my suggestion to you is to switch to a 2 year cycle
Oh yeah,
where
that's fine.
you only
Yeah.
where you refresh your product lineup every 2 years. Give yourself an extra year to work out kinks internally before you roll that thing out. And I know every single manufacturer has a tiered setup in their actual product lineup. So you can do this. You don't have to roll out your low tier, your mid tier, and your high tier all at the same time. You can stagger it. This year, you have a brand new high tier. It'll carry over for next year, but you'll introduce a brand new mid tier next year, et cetera, et cetera. You can do it that way. That way, you can still make money on a new feature set, but at the same time, you're kind of listening to the consumer world and saying, hey, we're tired of being beta testers. We're tired of getting products that need 15, 20 updates, firmware updates to fix problems in the first 3 months of launch. That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable. Absolutely. Absolutely unacceptable. And I know this because I work with other display manufacturers outside of TVs that you're lucky to get a firmware update once every 2 years simply because they do their engineering work very, very well in house before they release that product because their brand recognition and their brand standards matter. They don't want to put out a bad product just for the sake of saying, "Hey, I got something new and I can make more money." No, they don't want to do that. They care about their brand name. And that's the same thing with me. So yes, it can be possible. And I really do hope you guys listen to me and actually do something to improve the quality. Like the world is tired of it.
And well, and that kind of relates to posterization. There's a lot of confusion. Is it software processing or is it hard linked to the actual panel
It's
technology?
software.
Okay,
It's software.
excellent.
Case in point. Case in point. The same OLED module that's in the LG G5 is in the Panasonic Z95B. The Z95B does not have those low end color issues that the LG has. That's factory calibration. That's processing on top of that. Those two things can be corrected or managed in house by the manufacturer. Same goes for Sony and Samsung. Same exact thing. I know, for instance, the Sony is way too hot on the low end for color. But again,
Yeah.
people like saturation. There was that whole schmeal a year ago and 2 years ago. Oh, the desaturation in the lower end as it goes towards black. It should not be there. It should be just as saturated. No, it shouldn't. But guess what? Sony listened, and now you got a super saturated low end that is completely inaccurate. So pat yourself on the back. You got what you asked for.
And thanks for the super chat. Robert wanted me to pull up this question about the G5. So
Hmm.
Related, are G5 owners out of luck then? I saw your comment on AV forums that issues may require factory revision. Is that different than a firmware? Do we have a chance with updates? And so, but if you're saying it's software, the chances whether they'll do it or not, and I don't know if we can answer that, but if it could be addressed with software, then the potential is there, right, right, Dwayne?
Yeah. So let me unpack that correctly because this is kind of paraphrase of what I posted. So
Okay.
someone asked me this on AV forums. Can this stuff be fixed? I was like, could it be fixed? Sure. Will it be fixed is the question. From looking at history, history says that it probably won't. It'll just be an improvement for at earliest the next generation of that product. But I would personally like, for instance, LG to come out with a actual firmware update to fix these issues that exist on the G5. And here's how I'm quite confident that it can do it. Everything I can extract the 3D LUT, the factory 3D LUT. I can extract the 1D factory LUT. I know what the problems are. I know exactly what the problems are and why the LG responds the way it does. LG, if you want me to explain to you what it is, because I don't know if you understand it, please reach out to me. But I would love to have that conversation with you. But anyway, because I can extract it and see the issues, I know it could be updated via firmware.
Wonderful.
Um, yep. Now, having said that, it can impact those who had got their displays calibrated via a 1D LUT or 3D LUT type of calibration because it requires those particular items to be completely revised, right? So that's why I said that it's probably easier for them just as the newer ones come off the assembly line just to make the revision from the assembly line. Everyone who's already purchased it and has it at home, sure, it can be updated via firmware, but logistically, it's difficult. And at the same time, they don't really have a track record of doing that much of an update of it. And the only thing you have to do is just look back at the G3 and the G4. The G4 was nothing more than should have been called the G3 Mark II because that's literally what it was. It just fixed all of the problems that were wrong with the G3. So with next year's successor to the G5, I'm pretty sure they're going to have all of the fixes in it, and probably the new features of toggle on that sharpener stuff. For me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's all I want. That's all they need. Again, going back to what I originally said, they always find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. They had a great product. They had all the potential to come in first place. Bam, shot themselves in the foot.
It
So
happens.
it's yeah, it happens, and it's funny because my main display is an 83 G5. So I came home, from the shoot. I'm like, I sat in front of
83.
my thing. I'm like, listen, wow, man, you just such a loser, man. You're such a loser. Like, how in the world am I sitting here watching such a loser right here? This loser display. Come on.
And let me stop right there. You have a G5, so people need to know. You
Yes.
you saw you saw the shootout results. G5 dead last in every category, but in the end, they're all great TVs, and you still chose the G5. And I think that offers a lot of perspective for those who own G5s. You have the
Yeah.
G5, so I think
I
it's
have
wonderful.
I have I have the G5. I actually have the G5 and I love it because of the calibration set, which is second to none right now. If the Panasonic came out in a 83 inch
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and allowed me to do its calibration outside of Calman, uh, I might consider that actual TV. If there was a 83-inch Bravia 8 Mark II, would I get that? Absolutely not.
Speaking of the 83-inch G5, and Dennis, I want to jump on this real quick. We'll get back to your super chat. What about the 83-inch S95F that may be also using a similar primary RGB panel? Have you seen any of these? Have you calibrated these yet? Do you have a comment on the 83 S95F?
I've calibrated two of them.
Oh, nice.
They perform similar to the other Samsungs. So it's just like for me. It's just like Panasonic taking that panel and putting Panasonic's signature on it.
Mhm.
Same thing with Samsung. Samsung took that panel and put Samsung's signature on it. It is different than what LG is doing. It does not have the same anomalies that LG has. That
Oh,
again is factory calibration.
awesome. Now, a lot of people are wondering maybe the A95L should have been in the running because there were comments last year that, hey, the winner needs to come back to defend its title. So thank you, Dennis, for the super chat. If A95L was in the running, would it have taken second right behind the Bravia 8, given it also has the XR cognitive processor? And now it's pure speculation. So what are your thoughts on how the A95L would have done if it was there? Would it have come close? What?
I think it would have done well, and
Okay.
I say this simply because, again, with well, I should I I should say when it comes to the SDR side of the house, it would have done very well. On the HDR side, outside of the high APL stuff that we use,
Hmm.
that did cause the if I were to look at the judging stuff and at that level of detail, it would have struggled. But again, the content that we use was a balance between what Hollywood is doing now, what Hollywood did historically, and when I say historically, I'm speaking of for HDR, basically 2019 backwards is what we were looking at some of the content. Um, so, in that stuff that was 2019 and backwards, it would not have performed well because that was when Hollywood was like, okay, we're going to experiment with HDR and do full blown
Mm,
4,000 nit this
right.
or full blown 1,500 nit that. You know, they were really experimenting with HDR. That's not the case anymore with the stuff that's coming out, from Hollywood right now. Something just came out the other day. Oh, 28 weeks later. Now,
Mm.
not 28 years later. I'm sorry. 28 years later just came out on streaming this week. If you look at the analysis of its HDR, I think it's only doing 483 nits max.
What happened?
Um, but I'm just saying, this is the norm now for new releases. For new releases, if you're collecting, UHD Blu-rays like I do, to really get the full impact of HDR, you have to pick up the HDR versions of older titles that didn't exist in HDR at all. So I'm speaking of stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Those type of titles that they basically are remastering into 4K HDR. Then you will see stuff that is HDR, I guess people can call it. But
Yeah.
anything new, Captain America, Brave New World, nope.
Really?
The new Lilo and Stitch, nope. Uh,
No.
yeah, the new How to Train Your Dragon, nope.
Oh, the new
Anything,
Superman?
nope.
Oh.
Anything on Netflix, nope.
Nope. Yeah, I can tell you that. Okay. Now, just a quick shout out to everyone who's here. Thank you for showing up. Bring your questions to Dwayne. We're going to wrap up shortly. Got to get a few more super chats, and then we'll let Dwayne have some final thoughts. Star Rider, retired Air Force. Thank you for your generosity and super chat. Nice show. Nothing else. That's what I love. Just enjoying our conversation here. That's what we're about. Now, here's a few questions I wanted to bring up, and I, I can't believe I didn't ask this question of you. What about Samsung not having Dolby Vision? Is that a disadvantage? And this kind of opens it up. Your thoughts on Dolby Vision in general, because I know when you calibrate, you often also
Mhm.
calibrate the Dolby Vision
Oh yeah,
part of the
absolutely.
TV. So, what
Yes.
is the state of Dolby Vision and your personal opinion about Dolby Vision content on these TVs?
Well, let's start with what I love about Dolby Vision. It's not, you know, the fail layer, or I should say the FEL layer, which is called the full enhancement layer that basically gives you basically the maximum luminance from the original master for HDR. It's not that. The thing I love about Dolby Vision is really when I really, really dug into it, it makes sense. It is a controlled delivery system from
Mhm.
beginning to end. Okay. That includes the tone mapping. So, as you know, tone, or as I hope everyone knows, tone mapping itself is nothing more than an opinion on how to deal with data that exceeds the capability of the display. That's on the top end, and it's also on the low end. When it comes to Dolby Vision, that actual the range of how the tone mapping is done is left to the content creators. Okay, you don't get that with HDR10. You don't get that. You get that in a sense. You do get that in a sense with HDR10 Plus, but that's what I like about Dolby Vision, because the content creators, it's their art. They understand what to do and what not to do when it comes to tone mapping, and the output from said Dolby Vision product when it comes to tone mapping is to give a very similar experience regardless of the display capabilities. And when I say regardless of the display capabilities, that means basically in the details themselves, not the brightness. Okay. So it just ensures that there's no, if something was supposed to clip, it's because the content creator wanted it to clip, not because a manufacturer said, okay, I'm going to do tone mapping in this in a completely different manner. You know, manufacturers can do that. Again, tone mapping is an opinion. There's no standards to it. Okay. But that's what I like about Dolby Vision. Is it a disadvantage for Samsung? No, they have HDR10 Plus. I've tested HDR10 Plus side by side to Dolby Vision, depending on what piece of content we're talking about. They can be equal. There are some scenarios where they can be different, and that's more so dealing with those older titles that do have the fail layer attached to it. When it comes to the streaming stuff, which is Profile 5, again, depends on what we're talking about. HDR10 Plus, when calibrated, and if they're coming from the exact same, I guess you could say, base master itself, HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision should pretty much look the same. Now, if they were produced at separate times via separate, basically colorists, etc., engineers, expect differences. But that's an apples to orange type of comparison. If they were created at the exact same time with the exact same crew, they should look identical.
Okay.
So no, there's no disadvantage to Samsung not having HDR10 Plus, just like there's no disadvantage to Sony and LG not having HDR10 Plus. Excuse me, Samsung not having Dolby Vision, and
Hmm.
LG and Sony not having HDR10 Plus capability. Panasonic has it all, but there's no disadvantage to any of those brands
Okay.
for not having the other. Yep.
Now, new technologies are coming out. People are wondering what your thoughts about this RGB mini LED, micro LED, whatever they want to call it, coming out next year, if you have any.
I do. It's an LCD. It's a new backlight system, but it's still an LCD.
It's still an LCD. I was gonna say, yeah, not gonna be on
Yeah,
your
it's
list. OLED.
it. Well, for me, there's only two display technologies that I ever care about having in my home. One is
Hmm.
reflective. That's going to be your projector, your front projector. Okay. The other one is going to be self-emissive. So that's going to be your OLED, and it's going to also be your micro LED displays. So like your micro LED walls, like the Samsung wall.
Right.
I forgot what the LG calls it, but the ones basically that only the uber rich at this point, I guess, for this community can actually afford, because they're literally the high quality ones are literally over six figures for decent size. But those are the only two emissive display technologies that I will ever sit down and with my money and watch any content on. Um, but yeah, the RGB thing from Sony, and isn't Hisense coming out with one this year, or is it
Yes,
TCL?
we just saw it a couple of weeks ago. Big,
Yeah,
bright, but it really is more of a
it's
statement TV. But it's not like, yeah, I mean, it's big and bright. Is what I could say. I don't know
correct.
why you need 8,000 nits, but it's there if you need it.
You're right. It's there, but I mean the overall thing is it's still what, an
LCD,
LCD.
yeah, it's an LCD. And okay, so let's wrap it up with this. Are there any, well, actually, you know what? We forgot to ask. Did we address the double blind or having a blind test, the difficulty of that? Because I know we talk about it. So just so you guys know, we actually talk about it and we
Yes.
conscientiously choose not to do it. And I'll let Dwayne kind of explain the advantages, disadvantages, and why we don't do a double blind.
Well, the reason why we don't do it in the U.S. here is simply because the venue that we have, it cannot be pitch black. It is a store. It's a storefront. Okay, it can only get so dark in there. Because it can only get so dark in there, you will always know at this point in time which one is a Samsung. So if we can tell which out of the four displays which is a Samsung, that defeats the purpose of having a blind test. Would it be nice? Sure. Does it kind of eliminate bias? Not really.
Yeah,
It
okay.
just
I think that's a great point you just made because that's the whole point of doing it is to eliminate bias. Go ahead.
Yep. For me, it's just this simple. If you get up to it, if you get close, this like for instance, the UK shootout. I don't think they have parameters that keep the actual judges from basically pixel peeping. If you have, if your eyesight is good enough, it, if you get within probably a foot of the display, you can tell a QD-OLED structure from a WRGB OLED structure. I know I can. So I don't. As soon as you can figure out the panel structure, the whole blind test thing goes out the window.
Mhm.
What's the point? So because that pixel structure does exist and it is visible, especially on text, what's the point of having a blind test unless you restrict the actual judges from being within X amount of feet of the actual display, which of course becomes a problem when you start dealing with the BVM monitor because the BVM is only a 31 point something inch screen diagonal. You need to get closer to see some of the finer details because the image is just that small. So for me, blind judging doesn't make sense on the criteria that we have.
And now, as far as so that's not going to be on the table for next year for you guys, hoping
Nope,
there will be a blind test.
not going to
But
happen.
what would be? Because I know you're thinking about next year. What are you thinking of suggesting to electronics as maybe a change that would kind of fit how you envision a modern shootout to be, given how the TVs are right now and the new content,
Mhm.
or new, it may not be that much better next year. Yeah, improvements, one or two things that you think you're going to be working on in the off season?
Yeah, so for me, again, I'm a consumer first. So as I've said, I know Classy has said the same thing at the shootout. I know we've had discussions with many of the people at the shootout. The manufacturers need to pay attention to the quality of their colors and their grayscale and their brightness, how they come out of black. Literally from black up to probably around, I want to say 10 nits, really, just to keep it safe. You really need to pay attention to that because it is not as linear as the rest of the grayscale or the color spectrum. I think I have a file here that I can show someone if they want to see something. Let me see if I can find something real quick. But as I do that, that's one of the things that I personally want, you know, to improve. And
Uh-huh.
having said that, for me, I always take the opportunity of the shootout to be an educational experience. It is very, very rare, literally, for anyone to have the opportunity to see any of the displays from these brands fully calibrated, accurately calibrated on top of that, um, compared to the reference monitor that the majority of the stuff that they watch and consume at home was created on. That literally at this point there's what one, two, three possibilities for it. This one, the
Hmm.
UK shootout, and the German shootout. Now, if I'm not mistaken. right?
Yes,
There's a
yeah,
German one,
they
right?
have one. Yeah.
So, right, those are the only three in the world. So, um, I want to make it an experience, and I want to bring in an additional educational piece because I see now, based on some of the shenanigans that I saw online yesterday, that there may not be, even though you might have a title, you may not really know what's going on or what you should be looking at. So that's just an education. That's an educational thing that I personally wish, because I did see the comments and I did speak to one person from the shootout that said, "Hey, such and such, was doing this after the stuff." I personally want to create a more educational environment. So next year we're going to do a more presentational type event than just sit back, look at test patterns without in outside of just saying, okay, this is the test pattern, this is what you're looking for. No, I need to add in some more information clearly, and because I look at it like this, the shootout itself does have its crowd, but it in the vast scheme of everything when it comes to influencing the PR and the marketing departments of any of these TV manufacturers, it let's just be honest, it's not going to happen, right?
Right.
However, what I can do is get some of these, get more of the reviewers and the influencers from YouTube to come to the shootout, participate in the shootout, be educated on what to look for in their reviews online because
Hmm.
they touch a lot more, many more of the customer base that these manufacturers rely on to make profit. If I can educate those influencers to do a better job of their reporting, guess what happens for everyone else? They actually will be forced, and I hate to say that I hate to say that you have to be forced to do something, but that's just the reality of this at this time. They'll be forced to make
Right.
changes because if everyone's reporting the same thing and saying this is bad and this should not be, guess what's going to happen? The manufacturer's going to have pressure to fix it. Case in point, LG. Thank you.
All right. And with that in mind, I think we're going to wrap it up. And okay,
What was
so
that? Yeah, what was that? What was that last one that came across the
so I wanted
screen?
to mention they wanted a breakdown. Wait, let me push it up because he's been watching you since forever. So let me read this comment, John
Yeah,
Lira. D-Nice, been watching Shootout since way back when, and I remember you and others would show everyone in each category. The mistakes every displays were showing, bring that back, please. So we're talking about the itemized subcategories on the
got it.
scoring
Okay.
sheet. So they're wondering, why did we summarize it? Because they want to see the breakdown of the scoring for each subcategory.
Yeah. So this goes back to this event being so long. Then again, I pay attention to everything. So last year, the year before, we had all of those categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, what happened, what people don't realize is that when it came to tabulation of those numbers, it was difficult because people started writing things into the boxes that did not make sense because it was overwhelming to them. It was too
Yeah.
many things in there. So this year we tried to streamline it and make it simple. The actual ballot itself, which was not posted online except for I think the Verge did show their actual ballot so that you could see it. So for instance, like color, there were two subcategories, one dealing with the low end, one dealing with bright stash skin tones. Same thing with the grayscale. We had the low end, and then we had technically something that was dealing with the mid range or the overall how linear it was, which would have also impacted the bright end also. So this was for both SDR and HDR. All right. Pretty much everything was identical with level set between the two. I know on the actual ballot itself they have different naming schemes, but when I presented everything, it was in the same format. We looked at the
Yeah.
same thing from SDR to HDR. Okay. So um, it's kind of like we can't win from losing. If we streamline
Okay.
if we things so that the judges are don't get burnout, and don't make errors on their part where, it kind of, we have to decipher stuff, which introduces errors into that actual stuff, by the way, for doing the calculations. um, we get dinged. If, we have this itemized line sheet that, is great for someone who wants to, basically, if you want to be an auditor. I don't know why you have to be an auditor online. I mean, just come to the damn event. you know Buy a ticket, come to the event. It's free. You just have to ask Robert, can you attend?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him turn anyone down.
It's
So
limited by space in the room, and first
right.
come, first serve. And we got
Right.
people,
First,
what's his name?
exactly.
Iceman and Bob were there, right? We got influencers there.
Exactly. He brought his family, and thank you for bringing the family. I spoke to his wife. I was like, oh man, I do. I feel he. She's like, no, this is his thing. I got my stuff here. I'm good. I'm happy. But come to the event. Stop trying to critique and criticize behind the keyboard. Show your face. I'm happy to have the conversation with any of these critical people in person, but I'm going to ignore you online because for me, you're e-thugging. I don't
Hmm.
do e-thugging.
Hmm.
So come to the event. We're transparent, and I have to address this. I know the lead of the UK one did something that was completely unprofessional yesterday and questioning the ballot and this and that. As far as the numbers are concerned, well, number one, your math is wrong. You don't know the formulas. If you did want to know what was going on, of which after you got the information, you could have publicly said it when there's nothing to hide. Why didn't you call Robert? Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you reach out to um, your other friend, which I know you reached out to, but asked him other questions instead of trying to find out information about what you wanted to know? We're open. We have nothing to hide. If you want to know something, be more professional about it. Come to us. We'll give you the information. Once we give you the information and you understand it, you're free to go and do whatever you want to with it. But don't try to be Mr. Queen online and try to, throw fuel on the fire. That's unproductive. That doesn't help anyone. Okay? You just make it worse. But I tell you what, I'm going to be watching your event, and I promise you, payback is a bitch.
Oh, and the challenge has been thrown. And just to give everyone context, this is why I'm there to live stream the entire event. There's no cuts. I
Yes.
got judges walking in and out. I got Dwayne coming in. You
Mm-hmm.
were showing your frustration. Oh, we got to make sure we recount. The
Yep.
delays were real. And so when you
Yep.
do that, the scars and all of reports, they're all there. But you see everyone's love for the event. But when it's
Exactly.
produced, you don't know what happened. You get a 10-minute video, you get a winner. So,
Exactly.
right, did it take 10 hours? Did it take 2 hours? And for me, I enjoy streaming the entire event end to end so you guys can see the struggle on both sides. And you could ask the hard questions, right, Dwayne? You were on twice and people were asking tough
Absolutely.
questions. You weren't running away. So that's part of our
No.
transparency. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking on that, because I did see the stuff where people were talking about how I was, being called to look at the battles and stuff as if there was some conspiracy. No. What happened was, I'm going to be transparent with it. They found an anomaly. They called me over there to brief me on what was going on. They asked me my opinion. I gave them an instruction, from my opinion and my point of view on what should be done. And I came back to the stream and started talking with Brian again. They did their job. They came back once they did what I recommended and showed me the results. I was like, okay, that's what it is. No problem. Let's roll. So that's when I came back and continued with the actual stream with Brian, and then finally they said, okay, we're ready to announce the winner. That was when I left and did the presentation on the winner itself. So that's what happened. There again, we weren't waiting on a wire transfer of money to come through from Sony. We weren't doing that. I promise you, if we had a wire transfer come through right now, I would be having this conversation with you guys from a beach somewhere outside of the country.
you
I
know,
promise
and
you that.
and people forget that wire transfer. You got Samsung there trying to get you that wire physically,
Exactly.
and you have Panasonic individual there The reps
Yes.
were there. This was the first year LG couldn't make it, but all the reps are there for the same reason. They want to make sure
Yes.
they have an eye because they're going to report back to their people what happened, why did they lose, and they'll see for themselves the strengths and the weaknesses. Because
Yeah.
as the judges walk up and they go, wow, that's a problem, these very same engineers are running up there. Oh my God, that is a problem. They're there,
Yep. Exactly.
right? Sony engineers, Samsung engineers, and Panasonics, right? They're there taking notes about their TV and what the judges saw and then bringing it back home. So I would say it would be
Yep.
impossible unless all the judges were, hey, how much did you wire this guy? Oh man, I got robbed, right? I mean, short of that
Correct.
craziness, come on, guys. They're all there.
Yep. And by the way, as transparency, we always are open to the said manufacturers who are part of the event to have any representative they want to come visit while I'm doing the calibration of their TV and ask any questions. If they see anything that I'm doing wrong, point it out. Case in point, both Sony and Samsung did that this year, did the same thing last year, no issues. Okay. I know even this year, Sony bought their wonderful CA410 that they use on the factory floor to measure that actual Bravia 8 Mark II that was there, based on the concerns that I had with it, and to validate what I was seeing was actually correct.
Mm,
And
excellent.
their engineer said, yeah, what you're measuring, I get similar measurements, almost identical back at headquarters. So we don't have anything to hide. We're open. We're transparent with everything. There's nothing underhanded here. We do everything by the book, and I promise you, because I care about my brand, just like I know the zones care about their brand. I'm not going to undercut or underhand anything about the shootout for anything. It's too damaging to me. No, it's not going to happen. So please, enough with the conspiracies, stories and
Yeah.
stuff that's going on, floating on there. Again, next year, come to the event. Those that we actually, those enthusiasts that we did invite to the event, to actually participate in it. I really am sad that you weren't unavailable to come. I can understand it if there were other things that were that you had to do, but I mean, we reach out to everyone. If anyone thinks that they're qualified enough to be a judge for next year, send an email to Robert. Put your name on the list. We are going to vet, like we did this year, the judges. So put your name on the list. If we can look and see that, yeah, you know what you're doing, you can come here and
Yep.
help us do the shootout. We're here. We're here for that.
Absolutely. And I'm going to end with a super chat. One of our fellow YouTuber reviewers as well.
Yep.
Graphically challenged. Hey, I appreciate the interview, display guy here, also known as display guy on
Yeah.
YouTube. Love
I
the
know
concept
exactly who he
piece.
is.
You know,
Yes.
it's all right, all right.
Yes.
Because as a reviewer, it helps me see some of these flaws pointed out. I mean, that's why I love covering the shootout. Helps me look for them in my reviews. And ultimately, it's just more information for everyone. So now,
Absolutely.
I'm going to leave you the last word, Dwayne, because
Yeah.
I've said a lot about it. Everyone knows my opinion. I think it's a great event. I think it's very, not just entertaining, but informative. But what would you like to leave our viewers and future viewers who will be
Yeah.
watching this live stream once it
Yeah.
ends? What would you like to
Absolutely.
say to them?
So, yeah, I thank you for all of your feedback. I thank you for all of your support. We do, in all honesty, we do this for you guys. We are not perfect. We never will be, So, yes, there can and will be, hiccups and things like that. But I promise you, we do our absolute best because we put 100% behind everything we do to make sure this event goes off with the hitch. And I just want to say to any and all reviewers or influencers out there who are actually watching this stream, if you ever have any technical questions in regards to displays and what to look for your reviews, I am here to help. You can reach out to me. You can email me at hello@av-fi.com. I won't charge you for pointing you in the right direction, because for me, knowledge is power. And the more of you guys who are educated and can apply that to your actual reviews, the more power we actually have to make sure these manufacturers give us the best product possible out of the gate, not later on after 50 million firmware updates and this and that. Again, I need your help and your support, so I'm giving you my help and my support, and I'm not trying to charge you for it. Please, if you have questions or you need some guidance, I'm here for any and everyone who's an influencer. I'm here for you.
And I will be posting that email in the video description below. So with that, I know, Dwayne, you took a lot of your time. You're a busy man. I think
Yep.
people realize you do a lot of calibrations, consulting for all types of companies, from projectors to whatnot. So, you know your business, and the goal is to help enthusiasts better understand their TVs or projectors. And I think we did that today. I think we shed a lot of light on how Shootout generally is hosted, and more importantly, how difficult it is to get it right. But I think we get it close enough so that there's transparency for people to understand, hey, this is the score. If you disagree, that's fine too. And then next year, we'll talk about it again. And which leads me to, I cannot wait until next year.
Yep.
Hopefully,
Yes.
go
Next
ahead.
year, again, it's going to be a completely different format. We don't want to do the same format over and over. The criteria will change again, and this is simply because, you know, we have seen case in point with test patterns themselves where manufacturers have learned to put in algorithms to detect test patterns
Mhm.
and basically pass them up until you do something weird with said test pattern, and then you trick it to that actual cheating algorithm to show what it's really doing to an actual pic, to an image itself. So we're going to continue to change this stuff so that we make sure that the manufacturers are always have their feet held to the fire to give us the best of their actual capability, and they cannot cheat us out of our money, our hard-earned money at that. So expect something brand new and different next year, but expect it to, at least from my perspective, to be even better than what we did this year, prior year, or any of the past TV shootouts, and that's
Absolutely.
globally.
Awesome. I cannot wait to start the preparations for next year. Okay, my friends, thank you for showing up. Click like on your way out. And don't forget, Dwayne D-Nice Davis. Those of you who are influencers or reviewers and you have questions, his email will be linked in the video description below. Until next time, my friends, stop the FOMO. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.